Welcome to the 2-Month Review, the weekly podcast from 3% and Open Letter, in which we take one book, break it down bit by bit, talk about it, make jokes, entertain you, have a good time, find some interesting anecdotes, and sort of, make a book more interesting. This is Chad Post, and as always, I'm joined by Brian Wood.
Hi, Chad. Pleasure to be on the panel today.
It should be a very interesting panel because we are also joined by Caitlin Luce Baker from University Bookstore out in Seattle.
Woo!
Hi. Hello.
Returning to the podcast. You were on the Physics of Sorrow one, correct?
Yeah, several months ago, back in February, I think.
It was still snowing.
Well, not here, not in Seattle, unfortunately.
It was snowing here, and it was before the baby was born, because there was a chance I was going to leave in the middle for the baby, which would have been very awkward, very odd.
Just dash out immediately, headphones still in.
Yeah, just leave the Google thing running. It's just a blank screen for like 7 hours. It's like a David Lynch
Cat walks
movie.
Through.
Probably would. So how are you doing?
I'm good. I was trying to find out information about Dorothy Leuthold, which doesn't seem to be. She's a very secretive person, and I have so many questions about who she was, and the internet was not.
There are a few things about the internet that are weird for this chapter. To preface it for everyone, so we are talking about Fox by Dubravka Ugresic, and we're talking specifically about Part 5, Little Miss Footnote, which is whatever pages it is, like 240 to 260 or so. And it's a short chapter, and it's one that's focused entirely on Dorothy did you say Leuthold?
I was trying to figure that out. Was Leuthold or...
I don't know. Leuthold it is now.
Somebody can correct us.
Yeah, she can come and correct us and explain all of her story, her descendants. So she is mentioned a few times in relation to Nabokov, who is the other main figure in this chapter, because she drove the Nabokovs across country on the particular trip in which Nabokov discovered the butterfly that he named Neonympha Dorothea after Dorothy Leuthold. So she became, in this sense, in the world of Dubravka's Fox, became a footnote to his sort of story where he took what happened with her and transformed it into this butterfly discovery, and even wrote a poem for the New Yorker about discovering the butterfly. And so the story, this chapter, to put it in like the most basic terms, is basically telling a little bit about her life, what could be found, and how little there is, which I want you to talk about in a second. A few anecdotes about Nabokov, a recreation of how they find the butterfly that's clearly not real, and then a couple little hints as to like some other connections to the rest of the book. But on the whole,
wait, that wasn't real? I just canceled my butterfly expedition I was going to go on. I thought that's how you caught all butterflies. Never mind. I don't want to go on this anymore. I'll just look at Google Images of the Grand Canyon.
Oh God! You can explain what happens there, Ryan. You can wade into those waters for us.
No, I won't.
You just get the page number.
I assume that was on purpose, the whole Grand Canyon.
The Grand Canyon was so Caitlin, you were going to do some research into this, and I don't actually know like what's true or what's false in this, except for like two very, very specific things. But what did you find about Dorothy? And like, do you know where he found this? I've never read the things about where he found this butterfly or any of those stories. That part I don't know. I meant to look that up today, but research is for losers.
Yeah, I was trying to, and this was really hard because I was like, I have the internet. I can find out information about who Dorothy was. Why did she leave the small town in Wisconsin? Was it Wasaka?
Wasaka, Minnesota. It's a super...
Minnesota. Wasaka, Wisconsin just kind of flows better in my head. So it's probably a really tiny town. Why did she leave at 33?
It's a suburb of Minneapolis, and it's like super bougie now.
But it wasn't probably in 1930 when she...
Doubt it.
Yeah, it was probably this little tiny town. And for a 33-year-old woman in 1930 to leave her parents, apparently never married.
Go to New York, yeah.
Now it would
learning
be
Russian,
common.
working as a librarian.
Yeah, and she was on the Upper West Side. And she owned a car and had a driver's license.
Yeah, that's
I have
yeah,
so
that's
many
true.
questions, and the internet was not really helpful about answering any of them.
And
It
Dubravka
was
doesn't
just failing
exactly
me
answer
and
them
frustrating.
either.
No, and I was wondering, she's on next week or in a couple? Is she?
She's going to be on in 2 weeks. Yeah.
In 2 weeks, and maybe if there's a chance, did you find out anything about her? How much of this is true and made up? Because the
Yeah.
basics of the trip.
Right. Because there is, I mean, it is referenced. A lot of the quotes in here, it's interesting. The structure of this one, we've talked about before how she likes to vary from like writing fictional sort of pieces to like essayistic things and goes back and forth in this book quite a bit. And you'll notice this time reading it, I noticed how many times she uses the quotes from the biographers to like frame like the main points. And then when it starts to get into like the parts that are not quotes from the biographies or from any of the other writings, it becomes much more fanciful. It has a section of which he finds the butterfly where I'll wade into the muddy water. So the story that's told in here is that Dorothy is urinating on the Grand Canyon, and the butterfly lands on her, and that's how Nabokov catches it, by seeing that it's landed on her private area, and he goes and catches it, and that's how he discovers it. And that's pretty fanciful. And then the other section that has no quotes from the biographies or from anyone else is the part where they're having Nabokov and Dorothy are having a lunch, and he's like quizzing her on butterflies and drawing out a butterfly on a napkin by all the things that she doesn't know and gets wrong, and sort of diminishing her in that sort of way too, all to make like a piece of art, to make his butterfly drawing or whatever, and to make the butterfly that comes out of there. So it fits in perfectly with her themes, but it is sort of interesting that like Dorothy doesn't become more than that. Like there isn't much more here aside from what's already been mentioned in those biographies, which is very, very small.
And those are all a footnote. I mean, it's all barely anything that she was. I'm trying to find the photo of the butterfly. Sorry, there was just not much about her, and kind of elaborating. And the luncheon that they partake in, that was years after this trip.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was kind of fictionalized about 2 years before she died.
That's what I was going to say too.
So that whole part was weird, and I have so many questions about who she was. And she's truly a footnote. And
really, I mean, it's perfect. She's like the perfect metaphor for this book and for what it's doing, of like the genius author, the genius creator, taking something that's like a small little bit and making it like last forever through their name or through their fame, and that person sort of becomes semi-obscured.
Right, and I think that's even meant like in the PR release for this book. It was even.
Are you going to quote back something I wrote about?
I am. It's like how minor events are transformed into major works of art, which is what Dorothy's life to Nabokov. So there's me quoting back something you wrote.
Yeah,
at you.
It's true. Sounds great.
It does, and I was like, hey, that's sort of Dorothy's life. She was a minor event.
What's interesting, or like what's really interesting, and Leuthold is how you're supposed to say it, I believe. Okay. Leuthold. But one thing that's interesting is that I think you've been looking at this too. There's a book coming out in, I want to say October. Date's not on here. September. It's coming out next month, called The Real Lolita, by Sarah Weinman, who's a writer, has written some other books about crime, about women in crime, and is a journalist. And she wrote this book about Nabokov and Lolita and the Sally Horner story, which Sally Horner I'd never heard of. There's a few different ways to approach this, but Sally Horner I never really heard of. But she was kidnapped as a young girl and taken by this guy who claimed like to her mom that she was like, that he was, or she told her mom that he was like a friend of her, or a dad of her friend, and she was going to go off on this trip, on this little vacation with him for like summer break. And he ends up kidnapping her and taking her from motel to motel and living across like the United States, basically like sexually abusing her. And, you know, the whole Lolita story, like the Lolita story is the same as the Sally Horner story. And I didn't ever hear this, but Sally Horner is referenced in Lolita. There's a toss-up line where Humbert says something like, "Oh, did I just do like what happened to Sally Horner, no, it was something more than that, or like sort of like dismisses it out of hand. And so this book is both about like recapturing the Sally Horner story, which is crazy, absolutely batshit crazy. It ends even more tragically and strange than you would expect. And then sort of merging that with like Nabokov trying to write Lolita for years and trying to like figure out the frame for it and what would make it work and how this story could come to be told. And when he found out about the Sally Horner story, how that sort of crystallized a lot of pieces of how Lolita functions as a narrative. So it's a really cool book that's both like literary history or not literary criticism per se, but literary history and evaluation mixed with like this historical crime reporting. And it's really interesting. And it sort of dovetails with this idea of like a footnote, that Sally Horner is in a way like a footnote that now is mentioned in Lolita, but most people don't know who she is. And yet it ended up creating this work of art that like millions and millions and millions of people have read.
True.
Indeed. Yes. Yeah, and I've been kind of going through the book, trying to read some of the Nabokov chapters that are more focused on him, and some of the Sally chapters as well. And he was interested in true crime, and I guess he may have said that it was not a complete influence, but then you look at how historical events have influenced some novels. If you look at The Nanny, which is not really a historical event, the book that was translated from the French that came out earlier this year.
Right. Yeah,
which uses the basis of the true crime, horrific crime with a nanny in New York for this book.
Right. Yeah. The whatchamacallit, Perfect Nanny.
The Perfect Nanny. Yes.
Yeah. That it's really interesting, and it is cool because Nabokov always is like putting in the real Lolita, it references a lot, and it's one of the few things that like probably everyone knows about Nabokov is that he's always favoring art over everything else. Like the end goal of being artistic, or the art is more important than anything. So like all those crazy, sort of entertaining, sort of like curmudgeonly intros that he has to the vintage reprints, where he's like, everyone's going to see psychoanalytic crap in here, and they're wrong. They're just dumb. It's all dumb. It's just art. Everything's like the art is the highest point. And he really like, even in this role of Lolita, sort of dismisses when these things kind of come up. Of like, was this real life event part of this, or was it based on this guy? And he's like, no, none of it. Art comes out of somewhere else. Art's beyond. And the book sort of undercuts that a little bit. And I think Dubravka's Fox is playing with that line of like, where are those influences, and how much does that matter when you create great art, or how does that transform? And I love that part of of how Fox functions.
Yeah, and I think in this part, it kind of feels like this chapter. You know, what is the fox in this chapter in this? And it kind of, which you kind of answered, but it just seems a little kind of stands out there, but it shows how, you know, as I reiterated, how this small little bit can change. This one person and a generous offer to drive the family across the country can change history.
Yeah.
Because without her, Lolita would not have been written. Probably. Right. I mean, it was influential because Nabokov cites a lot of the hotels they stayed in along the way, and the journey across America.
Yep. So like she smuggled her way into, she's the fox smuggling her way into the future, and into art through that part of it.
Right. And yeah.
What was your take on this section, Brian?
I liked it a lot. It was very interesting. Again, like it kind of has this essay feel, and then before you know it, it's slipped into a scene, and you're reading it just like it's regular fiction narrative. I love that trick that she does again and again. And yeah, it was so interesting and compelling. Like I just wanted it. I wish it was all true. You know, it's one of those.
Yeah.
It's like, no way. Oh, this probably isn't real, but no way. This is crazy.
Yeah, like how would you? I mean, it's so funny because it's like that. It's a weird game that goes on, I guess, with your suspension of disbelief of like you're buying into everything, the biography stuff, and then she tells the story on the cliffside with them finding the butterfly, and you're like, why not? But how would you ever know that? There's nowhere else that story would exist.
I always love that movie Fargo, because the very first thing with Fargo is it says based on a true story.
Oh, right.
Right.
Which the whole thing is made up, but they just thought it'd be a much more interesting movie if we say it's based on a true story. So can we do that? Yeah, sure. So they just say based on a true story, and the whole time you're watching, you're like, no way, no way. And then you realize like none of this ever happened. You're like, oh god.
The first time I read that scene, and that scene kind of stands out because how would you know those little intimate details about Dorothy's life unless she had appeared in a letter Nabokov wrote to Vera? But to give that much detail about her life, oh, Vera, guess what?
Do we have the details of like her grooming habits and her pubis and like all this stuff? That like, no, of course not. But
her underwear washing.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
well, that day the underwear didn't get all the way dry, so I had a choice to make. Right? What am I gonna do? Like,
thank God I had some long tights. I know it's a sunny day.
Yeah.
So one thing that you mentioned, the internet not being able to find anything and it letting you down. One of the things that was the mistake on all of our parts is that the opening quote here, "Human life is but a series of footnotes to a vast, obscure, unfinished masterpiece," is not from Lolita like we attributed it. It's from Pale Fire. But if you Google it, most times it'll show up saying that it's from Lolita because the internet is that.
Right.
Yeah. So it ended up, it's kind of like a perfect sort of. It's very funny. It's unfortunate. It'd be nice to have it correct, but at the same time, it's kind of cool that like you can't really prove it wrong unless you read the book. which you should.
Pale Fire.
Both Pale Fire and Lolita are amazing, but yeah, it's supposed to be from the other, but it's funny. Dubravka had a funny joke about it where she said the internet is sort of like the internet's like when you're in a town and you ask someone where Main Street is, and they're like, "Oh, it's just 2 lefts up there," and it's never 2 lefts up there. That's never where Main Street is. The other thing that I'm going to blow your mind because I'm going to drop this in here right now so that you guys can make of it what you will. So on page, first on page 248, Marone is referenced. Her boyfriends, worshipped by her various boyfriends. Her Marone cooed to it, calling it his little vixen, which you guys can put the context around that anytime you want to. And then the other time is on page 254. It says she's talking about her talking to Nabokov about her friend who's a poet, friend in quotes, who's a poet, who's Miron Bolochkin. He's a Russian Jew, came here from Harbin. So was it, pray tell, this Russian squirrel, which Bolochkin means squirrel, who taught you to swear? It was. And does this Bolochkin from Harbin do? He's busking as a clown, which is a funny reference back to, if you remember, the woman on the stilts that was like the streetwalker. Now, Miron Bolochkin was referenced already in this book. On page 224, you'll see that on the bottom of page 224, after a few months, this is in the section about Levin and Levin. After a few months in Birobozhin, whatever, where he'd make friends with Miron Bolochkin, actor and poet, he sets out for Harbin in Miron's agreeable company. The two of them muddle along together for a time, and then each chooses his own direction. Bolochkin stays on in Harbin, seeking passage to America, where Levin goes on to Shanghai, a free city where no one is inspecting passports or visas. So there's Miron popping up as Dorothy's boyfriend in the next chapter after having been Levin, or mysterious Levin that's also multiple people in multiple places in this book in there. And then to tie that all together, in Penin, Mira Bolochkin is one of the main characters, is one of the characters that's referenced. And there's jokes in there about squirrels. And so it goes forward into Penin as well. So that would be that one that I don't think everyone's going to pick up on. So that is a gift.
Yeah, nice one. Jeez.
And that's what I like about this book so much is that you're reading it along, and I've read through it once, and I've read some sections. I read this section a couple of times, and then I read the one where the soldier, her boyfriend who lives in the house.
Oh yeah.
A few times. That was fascinating to see, and there's some place I kept like slipping back to. But to see all the layers in here, and to kind of, it's almost like a puzzle to see where different things are referenced and different people are referenced in this book.
It's very true. I wonder, like, I mean, some of this too, like, floats by because you see the Russian names. I mean, maybe this is just me, but I think like you see the Russian name, and I just read it, and I'm like, okay, it doesn't register as like anything more than that. Like it's just one of the names, so it takes a lot to like keep in mind. And having like putting together a list would be sort of helpful in a way. But all those connections are littered throughout here, and they're there for the reader to pick up on and to start to play with, putting together. But I can imagine at the same time Dubravka having an amazing time figuring this out and playing this game and like writing it all and being like, this must be so much fun. Like living between those worlds of fiction and essay, to like drop in little subtle hints, to have these things that are real and things that are completely invented. It's pretty wonderful.
Yeah, everything feels woven. Like there's threads that if you pull on it far enough, you can like pull apart from some other far part of the novel, but it's still stitched super tight together so that, you know, there's not like ends everywhere that are, you know, fray. Like it's really tight and neat, but yeah, there's separate little threads all over the place that, yeah, this is hard stuff to do, and she's doing it really well.
Yeah. And it does make sense too, like with this section as a good contrast in some ways to that opening section again, where we talked about how it's very essayistic at the beginning about the story,
and how stories get,
and stories I get. But it's almost like that's a good entryway, and then you get something like this, and you're like, oh, this is kind of how a story about how stories get made, but it's being told now in a different way, in a different approach to that. And one that's like a little less essayistic or a little bit less heavy on those historical parts and much more on like these little flights of fancy that come about.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes this book, I mean, I keep saying this is so fascinating, is that you kind of relate this, and I kind of feel, you know, as the fox is a trickster in literature, and she's kind of playing with us like that. Playing with us and seeing what she can do next. And I'm talking to Dubravka on this, but throwing all these bits in, it's just, shit.
Like, how smart do you expect people to be? Like, this is really
exactly. That's why I try to use the internet, and then it, you know.
I was thinking of writing a post tonight, possibly, and all of it was going to be about like the simplicities of reading, and this is like the opposite of that. Like trying to I'm not going to try and explain it right now because I haven't even worked it out in my head. But like this, having prepared for this last night and then thinking about what to write today, I was like, man, this is like two different sides of the coin. Like this is where you're paying attention. You have to look at these knots. You have to know what's going on, and you have to be able to dissect it. And then there's a lot of books that exist that are just like surface, doesn't matter, whatever, you know, Jonathan Franzen novels.
Yeah.
It's the exact opposite of this in so many ways. So like, here's what you're going to feel, and here's how I'm going to describe how you're going to cinematically feel that.
Yeah.
And this book is so much more than that. I find it so much richer and more enjoyable to read in the end because it has those layers that as we're going through this, we're picking up on or sort of playing with, and it's so much more fun, I find, than reading one of those other sorts of books.
Yeah.
Right.
Like
and
go ahead.
Oh, okay. So this one makes your mind work, your brain work on this one. You can't sleep while reading this one because you're constantly kind of flipping back and forth, and I think she makes every sentence count, every word count in this book. Whereas, you know, some literature you read, like, you know, Franzen. I didn't read Franzen's last one. I used it as
I didn't either.
It was a good prop up my keyboard book, but it's perfect. Sorry, Penguin.
At the same time, we're going to have Ryan Chapman's going to come on next week, and he's a huge Franzen fan. He always gets super pissed at Tom and I when we make fun of Franzen on the 3% podcast. So and I'm certain he's going to listen to this, and he's probably folding his clothes and screaming at me right now. But I can understand, I can respect as well the desire among some readers, or especially like, you know, just your average person, to just want a book that you just sink into like a cinematic universe that you don't need to think about. Like,
rule number 1, the reader is your friend and your ally. So you need to treat your friend and your ally nicely by having a good, just warm, cozy book to read.
Sometimes.
I'm not kidding. I think that's like his first rule of writing. It's like the reader's your friend. Whereas Dubravka's like, I don't give a fuck.
I think she respects the readers in a different way, right?
No, I know. Yes,
yeah.
Of course.
No, but I think it's one of these arguments, or it's one of these like debates or like topics that can come up over and over again, and you always get trapped by things of saying like, it's like Franzen's old thing of like Mr. Difficult versus like books that please you or whatever. He's like, there's no reason to read William Gaddis because any author that makes you work is like horrible. You shouldn't have to work as a reader. And that's judgmental and also seems very small-minded and dumb. And at the same time, to be dismissing like friends and writers like that out of hand is equally like, well, but they give people pleasure and they're, readers enjoy that and they get something out of it in a different way. That you can't be that much of an elitist either. So there's like, it's a trap argument, but it is sort of interesting of the different approaches that people have. And that's all possible, and that they reward things in different ways. And I personally have always been, I'm sort of going off into Chad land here for a second, but I've always been personally very fascinated by that in the way that it relates to the way that your brain works and like how your brain rewards pleasure and rewards things in different ways, especially in relation to like it comes up with music a lot where you're basically predicting things, and the more accurately you predict what's coming next, the more it sort of reinforces the cycle of feeling good about yourself, that you knew the next note, you knew the next melody, that's the melody that's played. It gives you like a little stimulus, and you start to see, and this is why people like over the age of 33 don't listen to new music or whatever, that your tastes are fixed at a point in time because you've become like, I always listen to new music too, but like part of the argument is that you still find the same, or you're attracted to the same patterns, and that your patterns are sort of like locked down at some point, and that I think about that in relation to books as like the Franzen level, to continue with this bad sort of A versus B analogy. The Franzen level is the sort of cinematic, like it's what you see is what you feel is what you have. And that gets reinforced a lot in our culture of like that you want things to be there and to be the surface and to be described and to be able to be seen. And that there's a different level of pleasure with people like Nabokov and Prak and Dubravka who are doing things that are like mental, and that they're a second level, or Katyak or whomever, where that first level of like the pattern that you expect to be there is there and that's satisfying. That part isn't necessarily there, but there's some other thing that as you puzzle it out or as that clicks, that's a different sort of reward. And there's like a different sorts of rewards to reading. And I feel like she's working in a vein that like is very classic in a lot of ways, but it's also like a vein that's very much not the Franzen vein. It's a different one. But there's something about the way the brain, the way that people work with that I get obsessed with. I've been obsessed with it for years. This is like half one of my lectures for one of my classes I just gave you guys. So
we didn't have to pay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, look at that. Don't tell the University of Rochester.
Well, it's funny because I remember reading an interview where Nabokov described, like, there's some people that write with the head in mind, and there's some that write with the heart in mind, trying to get out at sentiments and that sort of thing, right? Like Franz would be like the heart, right? Yeah. And whereas Gaddis would be the head. And he says he tries to do the spine, which connects both of them, and it has like this electrical energy to it, right? Like some heart, some head, like he writes with the spine in mind. And I feel like Dubravka kind of does that as well, where it's super intellectual, but it also is great at just, ripping your heart out if it needs to in some spots, and being very, there's sentimental parts to it that are very touching and tender. And it's a very crazy balance to do that, and she does it really well.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I was going to say that I don't know if Franzen's writing with his if he's a heart person or if he's more like my whiskey bottle of a fighting cock.
Yeah, Franz with his dick. Did you read that or did you send me the Jezebel article where it was every love scene Franzen's ever written? It was like, oh my god.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not pretty.
That's an article worth looking up. I forget the lady that sent that out, but she did the hard work of finding every love scene and every.
It's not pretty at all. It's disturbing to say the least.
The one thing though I did really enjoy that's also somehow layered in on this tiny little section is the whole talk about labeling and power.
Oh yeah.
I really found that part fascinating. The first thing it made me think of with footnotes was I haven't read this book in forever, but it was Things Fall Apart.
Oh yeah.
And I remember, at the end we're following the protagonist Okonkwo, and we're learning all about him and his family and all this kind of stuff. And spoiler alert, Okonkwo dies at the end, hangs himself. and there's the commandant. This like white guy shows up, the commandant, and he's like, oh, what a fascinating man, this Okonkwo. He might make a nice paragraph for my book on the peoples of the blah 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 blah. Like after like this huge wonderful character that we're following, Okonkwo, is only going to be one tiny little like footnote, one little paragraph in some other guy's history. And this reminded me of that. Like this, Dorothy has this amazing story I want to know about. Like you're going crazy. Like I want to find out more about her. It's like, nope, you only get to be a footnote because this is Nabokov's the big person here. We don't get to learn about her. Like, yeah, it made me think of Things Fall Apart. Like everybody is a footnote to somebody, and you try not to think about your life that way, but it's very true.
It is, and I think this is part of the frustration. I think there's a line in here where you kind of don't know who you intersect with or interact with who will play a major part in your life.
Yeah.
And certainly Dorothy, she took lessons in Russian, and she offered to drive Nabokov across the country. I mean, if he had written Lolita, what would we? I mean, he wrote his other books, but Lolita's the one that everyone knows, and everyone, if they've read something by him, has read.
Yeah, that's very true.
School.
There's the part that you like sort of related to what you were saying, Brian, about the labeling too. To go back to that, I'd forgotten about that bit, but that does run throughout here a lot. Yes. On like page 250 and 51, talks about romance. The perfect romantic couple is therefore a sort of monstrosity, and a successful romantic bond is the willing embrace of a form of invalid functionality, with one half depending on, conjoined with, subservient to the other. In this sort of symbiotic love, there must be a perfect coordination for the love machine to operate. Hence, it is the shortest path to the functionality of domination, i.e. the muffling of the beloved. Hence, Humbert wished to sedate Lolita to gain control of her. Hence, Nabokov pinned the butterfly to the board and spread its wings to fully savor his victory, which is part of that pinning and then that comes up as the red labeling on the butterfly at a later point in time, too.
Yep. The hunter aspires to no fame but the glory of naming. In other words, nothing short of God's glory. It's funny. So I've been doing a ton of research on the Pentateuch and like the first 5 books of the Bible, and reading like commentaries on it and stuff like that. And one of the interesting commentaries I never thought about was with Adam. God wanted Adam to name all the animals, and the importance of that is it gives him dominion and power over. By naming, you have power and dominion over. Like it's now your subject, basically, right?
Isn't this the beginning of semiotics?
Yeah, no, but like I find it interesting. Like I find it very interesting that God's glory, like the hunter aspires no fame but naming, right? And it immediately brought me back to that commentary I just read about Adam had to name everything to have dominion. That way, man is on top and powerful over everything, right? Like it's like it fits perfectly again with this whole thing of like Nabokov having power over Dorothy, the way he, even though he names a butterfly after her, but he's demeaning to her, or with the labels and like
names a butterfly after her, and she doesn't know anything about butterflies.
Yeah.
There's also the just a random connection thing. When she does, we mentioned a few times when she urinates before he finds the butterfly, reminded me of like the character from the chapter with the boyfriend in the woods when she's burning everything down and leaving, flipping it off when she stops behind her car and urinates too. We have a couple of scenes of women bending down and urinating outside, which I think I approve of.
There's another biblical reference in there too. He calls it the burning bush.
Oh yeah,
It was just like being like her sense of humor again, but with Moses and the burning bush.
So good, so good. So, did you guys have a favorite line from here?
I had one of the first lines. This one I can go with this one down here. There was like on the first page that I had written notes on. We are glued to one another like transparent layers with hidden text. We grow into one another, all of us and each of us being inhabited individually by secret dwellers as we dwell in the homes of others.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many lines in this book that you kind of read them. It's just everyone.
Right above that, I have underlined literary footnotes, joust for survival like cocks trained for the fight, which is really fun. She's so good. The one that I was going to say is I usually have my dark ones, but this is I don't have a dark thing today. But I do like how she like diminishes Nabokov really handily in 254, where they're talking about the conversation. Blah, blah, blah. She says, and Dorothy felt slightly queasy. Heavens, what a boy. He's such a boy, she repeated to herself with a sense of despair that seemed out of proportion to the situation. And she was impatient for the moment when they'd leave the restaurant and part ways. I really liked it just like a quick dismissal of like the Nabokov sort of over the topness.
I'm sorry, my cat just tore my headphones out. It's okay.
Is the part from 254 where she refers to him as being such a boy, which I just love. It's like it diminishes him in return. So
I like that too. Yeah, I underlined both parts that you guys read, oddly enough. So I'm scrambling to find another one. Damn it! You go third and you get your thunder stolen.
That's true.
I could just
randomly. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Sorry, my cat tore my headphones out, and I have this bag of treats up here, so he will be quiet. And I think there's some kind of drug, obviously, in them. He tore the headphones out, and just, okay.
My cat eats my headphones as much as possible. Like if I leave them on the table or whatever, he tries to bite through them. And they were the old Apple ones that had like not like these ones, but the ones that were like slightly different, like the rounder part. He would puncture them with his teeth, and they would never work. And he's like, he's an asshole. I don't know where he is right now. He's sleeping over there, nice and peacefully and looking great. But generally, he just comes after them and claws them off, and then just gnaws on them until they don't work anymore. Which is why I can't hear out of my right ear. I'm pretty sure. And I feel like I'm like have vertigo because I can only hear you guys through my left, and this one's just not doing anything because my cat ate it. So.
I've got you both beat. Cool. So I had to do some dumb research on Las Vegas hotel advertisements. I watched like an hour and
dude, they're amazing.
Yeah, and like taking down notes and stuff like that. So I've got a bunch of notes on Las Vegas like stuff I don't want to do. And so I hear a cat throwing up in the middle of the night. I'm just like, oh, damn it. Like that stupid noise. If you have a cat, you know that noise. And you're like, all right, I'm going to get up. I'm going to do it now. I'm not going to be lazy. So I got up, had my phone as a flashlight, looking around for it. Couldn't find it anywhere. So I went back to bed. I wake up this morning. The one piece of paper I took all my notes on, it's right on top of that. Like the entire house, and he does it on this one piece of paper that has all my handwritten notes, an hour's worth of work. It's just cat vomit all over it. It's like, you son of a bitch.
Oh my God.
Oh well. It probably wasn't that good anyway, so whatever.
There's a story I heard about Las Vegas Hotel that you should hear about because you might want it for your novel. I'll tell you when we're done with this.
All right, sounds good.
One other little aside that if anyone out there grew up in going to Crossgates Mall in Albany, New York, I think I was telling Chad about this a few months ago. There was a plaque underneath the stairs to Nabokov and his Corner Blue Bloodify.
That's so random.
It was really random, and I've looked for it on the internet, which is not my friend. And there's no trace of it. There's no trace, but it was there, and other people saw it.
It just said it was in Lolita.
Yeah.
Whoa, yeah, it just says it's in Lolita. It's just take the second left. It's fine. You'll get there.
Yeah, there was like nothing there. So then I ended up watching Crossgates Mall ads from like the 80s.
Oh God,
which is like bizarre.
I did like the part where he shit on St. Paul. Was it Nabokov that said that, or yeah, here it is. Okay, yeah. I love this letter for some reason. In a letter to Vera, November 9th, 1942, I am healthy, eating plenty, taking my vitamins, and read newspapers more than usual now that the news is getting rosier. St. Paul is a stupefyingly boring city. Only owls at the hotel A girl at the bar looks like Dasha, but my apartment is charming. That's your letter. The most like wonderful writer ever. That's the letter you give to your wife. Like, wow. Marriage just it crushes everything that's beautiful in you, apparently.
Nowadays, it would be like emoji of a city, poop, owl, apartment, thumbs up.
Yeah.
And citing Dasha as the woman in the hotel, kind of, because she's described multiple times in this chapter, which is just 17 pages, as being mousy and unattractive and overweight. I mean, she's not described as being a vixen.
No.
At all.
Not at all. I forgot. I was going to try and see if those two pictures that are referenced in here, if those are available online, which I feel like the second one where they're leaning against the car, I feel like I've seen that before.
I looked for it. I couldn't find anything.
Really?
Was it in... No. It was Nabokov. I don't think it was in I Have Nabokov in America, but I don't think...
I don't have any of those biographies.
I think the book said it was in Butterflies, a book about butterflies.
Yeah, it was in the Butterflies. I did find a picture of the butterfly that he found and named across Dorothy. So
yeah.
On my crappy phone.
Yep, that was the only thing I could find too, was that the nymph, Dorothea.
And
I did like that the word nymph is in that as well, right? Because he always calls Lolita his nymphette.
Yep.
Right, that's kind of cool.
And that's so. Well, anyways, do you guys have anything else that you want to add?
This is a killer little section, man. This was fantastic. I liked it a lot.
18 pages and just tight.
Yep.
So good. All the things are there. So next week we're going to be going over part 6, which is the last section of the book. It's a little bit longer section. It's called The Fox's Widow, and this will have to take place on Tuesday because Monday is Labor Day. But Ryan Chapman's going to join us. He'll explain himself when he joins us. And then the week after that, Dubravka will be on. She'll be in America because she begins her tour, which if you're not already aware of, you should visit 3%, our website, whatever, rochester.edu/3% written out. And there will be a post on there with all of the dates of where she's going. She's going to Boston. She's going to Rochester. She's going to Toronto, to San Francisco, Portland, Chicago, and New York. She'll be part of she's starting off with the Brooklyn Book Festival. She's doing events. She's doing an event at 1 o'clock during the Brooklyn Book Festival on September 16th, but also at 5 o'clock where she's in conversation with Martin Amis. And it's just the two of them talking about writing about America. So that's all mostly in support of both of American Fictionary, which comes out now, but also Fox will be mixed in there as well. But we'll be talking about that next. And then the next season will be Pessoa's The Book of Disquiet. There'll be more information on that soon enough, including links to where you can buy the book and so on and so forth. But everyone should buy it from your store. Right, Caitlin?
Yeah, in fact, I had to, well, the Pessoa, but I had to reorder Fox.
Yeah.
Which is great because
I like
I
that.
got a pile of it. And I had it on display, and then I finally wrote a staff rec for it a few weeks ago, and it was selling. And I was just like,
nice.
I got to. It's always like one of those exciting things. I get to reorder this, and we have a small branch on campus, and they had 2 copies. I was like, can I have your copies? So Wanda, we just sold them this morning.
That's
so I was like,
awesome.
Okay, that's great. And so that got me really excited because it was just selling. It was on display. It's intriguing. One of my favorite customers. She works at the university. She showed me what she'd bought, and I can't remember the other book she bought, but I was like, oh, that one's good too. But she bought Fox, and I was like, oh, I can't wait till you start reading this and talk about it. And of course, it's like you have to watch or listen to the podcast and 2-month review.
I feel like the podcast, aside from like Pete, there are people that have read it that have written about it. Pete really got into unpacking a lot of it. But I feel like this is this podcast actually is one of the solid ones where we do help people into this world, because you could just pass those things by, like we were saying.
Oh, yeah.
I'm saying that our podcast kicks ass, which is
it does.
It's important. Yeah, someone has to say it, right?
Well, you tend to get books that are more Mr. Difficult than Mr. Heart or whatever. So it's nice to have a companion to help you through.
True.
That we're not alone in this. What the hell's going on? Kind of a feeling when you're reading some of these. Yeah.
Fair enough. But so be sure and check in on the website. If you can see her in person, please go. Dubravka is a wonderful storyteller, an amazing woman to meet. And it's going to be a really adventurous trip for her. So should be a lot of fun.
Does she drink?
Moderately.
Moderately? No, I'm just wondering.
Is that Portland, Oregon, or Portland, Maine that she's?
Portland, Oregon. She'll be at Powell's on Hawthorne.
Oh, that's before Powell's.
I believe on September 27th.
Okay.
If I remember all my dates correctly. She's in San Francisco on the 25th, Portland on the 27th. She's doing an interview there on the 28th, and then she goes to Chicago for an event on, I believe, October 1st. She will also be in Pittsburgh at the City of Asylum later on in October. She's staying in America for a while. She's staying until the middle of November. So we even have some time in late October and in November where she could do some extra little one-off events as well. So
awesome.
Yeah, I may have to go down to Portland and drag my brother.
Do it.
Along. I know.
Do it. Also, if anyone, I was gonna castigate you. I felt like you guys, if anything, you guys must have merchandise. So I was gonna try and start a trend of like wearing like bookstore merchandise on every podcast, but like I had Moon Palace last time, and then I have nothing else. I have no T-shirt merchandise from any other bookstore. That I'm aware of.
T-shirts.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
I've tried on T-shirts and totes. You know, my favorite T-shirts, book T-shirts in Seattle, Tom Nisley store, Finney Books.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No.
I was gonna wear it tonight because it's really cool. The fiction one, it's made up, and this is a nonfiction. I think it just is true or real. They're great, and his store has lettering on the side when you walk in. The fiction section says "made up." They're really fun, and they're just these cool design block letters, nice soft cotton. I'm doing a little pitch for Tom's.
That's solid. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they're great shirts.
If they have a link, send it to me. I'll include it in the show notes.
Okay.
We are making a 10th anniversary T-shirt for Open Letter, I believe. So we're trying.
Nice soft quality cotton.
They will be soft quality cotton, and it will be available if you come to our if you buy a ticket to our event in Rochester for our 10th anniversary that Dubravka will be at. People will get one of them, assuming we can work this all out in time. Otherwise, we'll send some to our friends. Like you'll get one.
Oh, nice.
You both will get one. But anyways, so I don't have anything else to add. So next week we'll go over the last part of the book. Then we'll have Dubravka on, and until then, I've got nothing. Anyone else?
No, I think that's a great way to end.
Yeah, you can check us out.
Anybody?
All that other stuff. Yeah. I never go through it right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, bye everyone.
Adios.
Okay, it stops.